We're going to be testing for cracks now. Back at the oven, we are going to be using a 3-step process. We first want to put on our safety glasses because we're working with chemicals. It's very possible that when we drop forge the material, we might have cracked the metal. This test we're going to do will find out if in fact the blade is broken. We first apply some cleaner. Make sure you're spraying away from yourself. Spray that onto the rag. These materials are flammable. Spray it on the steel and we clean it off. The second chemical we're going to use is called the dye penetrant. It's kind of a red dye that will soak into the metal. If there is a crack in the steel, it'll soak into that spot especially. And it's just red, and you just spray it on. And you want to let it sit for about 10 minutes while the chemical absorbs into the metal or any cracks or defects. After a 10-minute wait, you can come back and wipe off the excess dye. Even though we're wiping it off, if there is a crack in the metal, that dye will have seeped into that crack, and even though we wipe the surface, the dye will stay. The last chemical we're using is called a developer. It's kind of like a white spray paint. As we apply it, we want to make sure the can is shaken really well. And we just apply this, and then we're going to let this dry. We're now going to cast the handle for the screwdriver. Go back to the drawer where you found the directions. Find a number 3 Phillips screwdriver and a screwdriver handle mold. Make sure it has a matching set of letters. The handle molds are custom made and they only fit with the matching side. Take the screwdriver and the mold over to the oven. Check your blade to make sure there are no red cracks running down the screwdriver blade. A red crack would indicate that there is a split in the metal, which means the screwdriver probably wouldn't last as long. Put your chemicals away, move the cloth out of there. Now we need to disassemble the mold. We're going to open it up. We need to put in a spray release agent so that the handle will come out of the mold when it's done being casted and cured. So I will spray a thin coat of this release agent into the handle mold. Lay the screwdriver blade in the mold and then just close that up and tighten those fasteners. You can see the screwdriver blade inside there. Okay, with your number 3 Phillips screwdriver, go ahead and tighten those up nice and snug. Both front and back. And we're going to go over to our workstation to prepare the mixture. Again, we're going to be working with chemicals, so again we want to wear some eye protection in case there's a splash. We'll also be wearing some vinyl gloves. There'll be several different color samples sitting out. You want to look at those. The material we're using is called Eurocast. It's a 2-part chemical that when mixed together turns from liquid into a solid. This was a conditioning process. Look at some of the different color samples. And I can add a little dye to the mixture, adding color or finish to the mixture. So let's take some of this out. We just put that on the popsicle stick, we drop that into the cup. And we're going to use equal parts of A and B. This is a urethane casting resin. And we open the bottle. We're going to use 1.5 ounces of each. That looks good. Now we're going to mix that colorant into part A. We're going to shake up part B just a little bit and add 1.5 ounces of that as well. And we want to bring it up to 3 ounces total. Good. Now the two chemicals are already starting to react with each other. We've got about 30 seconds to get that into the mold before it starts to turn solid. So quick action is required. We want to, again, mix the two together thoroughly, and the two parts are reacting with each other now. I'll stop about halfway through and let you feel the cup. You'll notice that it's starting to get warm as they react with each other. And that heat is what's used to then cure and harden the two chemicals. Okay, I want to pour that into our mold now. We keep that on a bit of wax paper in case we spill. We want to pour slowly. And we want to tap it now to release any air bubbles that might be trapped inside the mold. Again, this is a casting process. And attaching the handle to the screwdriver is an assembly process. So the screwdriver activity, you do all 6 of the material processing steps. You'll come back to your mold the next day and disassemble the mold. Once you have both fasteners out, you can gently separate the two halves of the mold. That release agent makes it easier to get them apart. And inside you'll find your casting. Looks very nice. Remove the screwdriver from the mold, and you can pick away any of the flashing, the extra material that's clinging on there. And now we're going to put it in the machinist vise to cut off the pouring spout and the vent. We're going to just trim that off with a hacksaw, cut that off, and then we cut off the 2 little vents down there. The vents allowed the air to come out while we were pouring our urethane resin into the mold. Now we need to do some sanding. We want to remove those remnants of material from the vent and from the pouring hole. Find some abrasive paper and just go ahead and start sanding. We also want to get rid of the mold line. It's that thin line that runs from one side of the casting to the other. If you ever look at a product and you can see a thin line like that, you know that it was cast in some sort of mold. It's kind of a dead giveaway. You can even sand the whole handle if you want, just kind of gently sand it away. I've got quite a bit of material to remove from that pouring hole. I'll probably just put some abrasive paper down on the table and work it that way. Yeah, let's try it on the table. You can apply a lot more pressure and get that material to come off a lot quicker. And just keep sanding until that line disappears. A little sandpaper around the edge of that blade helps to get that urethane resin off too. You can take your screwdriver back to the sandblasting cabinet and place it inside there. Sandblasting the surface of the screwdriver will give it kind of an antique look, like it's well worn after years of use, and you can also clean up the blade a little bit with a sandblaster. Looks really nice coming out of the sandblaster. We want to do one more thing to keep the blade from rusting, is add a little bit of paste wax. Find the paste wax and paper towel. You can use your screwdriver to open the can. And again, we're just going to apply some paste wax to that blade. Because the steel is not coated or protected in any way, so we want to make sure we put some oil on it as a coating. After that, you're ready to get it graded. Nice work. All we have left to do now is put the mold back together and put it back in the cabinet. Make sure you put the two halves together that they match, and run the fasteners in there. You don't have to run them all the way in, but just a couple of turns of that fastener will hold the two halves together, make it easier for the next person to locate the two matching halves.